London is full of places people walk past every single day without giving them a second glance, ever. Some of these places are older than empires, tied to executions, disasters, war damage, royal vanity, or ancient myth nobody remembers anymore. The city looks completely ordinary, only if you do not know what you are actually standing next to right now. Today we are covering 8 London landmarks that blend into everyday life, and the incredible history hiding behind each one. For every single spot, you will learn what it looks like today, where it actually came from, and one fact that will surprise you. By the end, you will never walk past these places in London the same way again, even if you have passed them 100 times. Some of today's stops are world-famous names hiding a secret detail, and some are so quiet you would never guess they even had a history worth telling. That mix matters, because London does not save its best stories only for the landmarks with gift shops and ticket booths attached to them. Let's start beside the River Thames, at a tall stone needle most tourists photograph and then forget within minutes. Cleopatra's Needle stands on the Victoria Embankment, an Egyptian obelisk that looks elegant, ancient, and strangely out of place beside London traffic. Most people photograph it for under a minute, snap a picture of the nearby sphinxes, and move on without ever reading the small plaque nearby. Despite the name, this monument has almost nothing to do with Cleopatra herself, and that name is really just a nickname that stuck. The obelisk was originally carved in ancient Egypt for the pharaoh Thutmose III, making it roughly 3,500 years old. Later inscriptions connected it to Ramesses II, adding even more layers of ancient history onto a single standing block of stone. The obelisk was gifted to Britain in the early 1800s, but then it simply sat in Egypt for decades because moving it was expensive and difficult. It finally reached London in the late 19th century after a genuinely dangerous sea journey nobody expects when they glance at it today. Transporting a solid, ancient stone obelisk across an entire ocean using Victorian-era engineering was considered a remarkable feat of ambition at the time. The obelisk traveled inside a specially built iron cylinder designed just for this transport, floating across open ocean like a strange metal capsule. A severe storm hit during that voyage, and several sailors died during the desperate rescue effort to save the cylinder and its precious cargo. So this quiet, elegant monument by the river carries pharaohs, imperial ambition, engineering spectacle, and a real Victorian tragedy, all in one object. Next time you walk along the embankment, remember that people actually died getting that stone needle to stand exactly where it stands today. There are actually 2 sibling obelisks connected to this same story, one now standing in Paris and another in New York, part of the very same ancient set. That means this exact style of Egyptian monument quietly links 3 completely different world capitals through one shared ancient origin story. Standing at the base of the needle, you are technically looking at something older than most recorded human history most people learn about in school. Our next stop is barely a landmark at all, unless you already know the strange little rule hidden inside it. Savoy Court is a short, elegant entrance road beside the famous Savoy Hotel, and most people walk past without noticing anything unusual. The land underneath belongs to one of London's most storied hotel sites, tracing back to the medieval Savoy precinct centuries before any hotel existed. Long before the hotel era, this land carried royal and noble associations, changing hands and purposes many times across hundreds of years of London history. The modern hotel culture on this spot really took shape in the late 19th century, when the Savoy became a symbol of modern luxury living. Here is the strange part almost nobody clocks. Vehicles traditionally drive on the right side inside Savoy Court, in a country that drives on the left everywhere else. The usual explanation is practical. This setup made it easier for carriages, and later cars, to approach and drop passengers at the hotel's entrance design. People often claim it is the only road like this in the entire country, but the safer way to describe it is one of London's most famous driving oddities. The beauty of this stop is that the landmark is barely visible as a landmark unless you already know the hidden rule inside it. Locals sometimes point this quirk out to visiting friends as a small party trick, watching taxis glide past on the wrong side without anyone else noticing. It is a perfect reminder that some of London's most interesting history is not carved in stone at all, it is simply written into daily traffic behavior. Our third stop takes us to a gateway that once mixed royal ceremony with genuinely brutal public punishment in the same small space. Temple Bar long marked the boundary between the City of London and Westminster, with some kind of barrier standing there since medieval times. Crossing that boundary once carried real legal and ceremonial weight, since the City of London operated under its own separate rules and traditions for centuries. After the Great Fire of London, The architect Christopher Wren designed the more famous stone gateway version that most history fans recognize today. Heavy traffic eventually made the old gate impractical exactly where it stood, so it was removed in the 19th century and later rebuilt elsewhere in the city. For a long stretch of time, the gate sat away from its original site entirely, before eventually being returned closer to the heart of the city once again. Here is the part that turns a pretty gateway into something much darker. In the 17th and 18th centuries, heads of executed traitors were displayed on spikes here. Those spiked heads served as public warnings, a brutal piece of state propaganda placed exactly where crowds and royalty would pass by daily. The same gateway that once welcomed kings and queens also once displayed severed heads as a warning to anyone thinking of committing treason. That contrast between ceremony and brutality is exactly what makes Temple Bar such a powerful stop in the middle of this list. The gate's story is really split into two chapters: the original medieval boundary site, and the later movement of Wren's actual stone gateway to a new location. Understanding that split matters, because visitors sometimes confuse the historic boundary itself with the physical gate that now stands in a different spot entirely. Either way, walking through that gateway today means walking through a spot that once decided who was welcomed into the city and who was executed as a warning. Our fourth landmark rises above the city itself, mistaken by many for nothing more than a viewing platform on a walking tour. The monument to the Great Fire of London was built between 1671 and 1677, commemorating the devastating fire of 1666. That fire destroyed thousands of homes and dozens of churches across the medieval city, reshaping London so completely that its street layout still reflects the rebuilding decisions made afterward. It was designed by Christopher Wren working alongside Robert Hooke, and its height carries a hidden meaning most visitors never realize while standing beneath it. The column stands just over 200 feet tall, a height intentionally chosen to match the distance to Pudding Lane, where the fire actually began. Here is the truly surprising part. This memorial was never meant to be decoration alone. It was also designed as a genuine scientific instrument. Wren and Hooke hoped to use the tall, stable column for astronomical observation and pendulum-related experiments, treating history and science as one combined project. The design even includes a hidden internal shaft meant to support delicate scientific instruments, a detail most visitors climbing the stairs never notice at all. City vibration and constant traffic eventually limited that scientific dream, meaning this famous memorial was also, quietly, a failed urban laboratory. So next time you climb the monument for the view, remember it was also built to study the stars, not just remember the fire below. Climbing to the top today still means walking up over 300 narrow stone steps, the exact same steps Wren imagined scientists might one day use for research. That blend of memorial and laboratory makes this one of the most quietly ambitious structures on this entire list, hiding a failed dream inside a working monument. Our fifth stop is easy to miss entirely, a small stone sitting behind protective glass that most passersby would never think twice about. London Stone sits on Cannon Street, and it happens to be one of the oldest surviving objects anywhere in the entire city of London. Records of the stone go back to the early 12th century, but its true origin remains genuinely uncertain, even to serious historians today. Some accounts even connect it loosely to Roman-era London, though no one has ever produced solid proof tying the stone conclusively to that period. It may be Roman in origin, it may be medieval, it may be purely symbolic, and nobody has ever definitively proven which explanation is correct. Over centuries, the stone became wrapped in folklore and civic importance, sometimes described almost as a kind of hidden heart for the whole city. Unlike most monuments with a neat plaque and a clear date, London Stone remains genuinely unsolved, and that mystery is really the entire story. It has been called a Roman milestone, a sacred relic, and a civic marker, and honestly, nobody living today can say for certain which one is true. That uncertainty is not a weakness in the story, it is exactly why this small stone still feels strangely important to an entire city. For centuries, some Londoners believed that as long as the stone remained safe, the city itself remains safe, an old superstition nobody can fully trace back to its source. Today it sits behind reinforced glass on a busy commercial street, guarded not because its value is proven, but because its mystery has never been solved. Our sixth stop moves from ancient mystery to something far more emotional, hidden inside a quiet park near St. Paul's Cathedral. Postman's Park holds a memorial most visitors discover almost by accident, a wall of beautiful ceramic plaques, with a genuinely moving purpose behind them. The park itself was created in the 19th century, and the memorial idea was championed by an artist named George Frederick Watts. Watts originally hoped this would become a national memorial movement recognizing ordinary courage, though in the end, only this one park fully carried the idea forward. It began in 1900 as a way to honor ordinary people who died while trying to save someone else's life. Instead of celebrating kings, generals, or politicians, this wall records everyday heroism from people history would have otherwise completely forgotten. The stories on these plaques are often devastatingly specific: children rescued from drowning, workers killed trying to save colleagues, ordinary Londoners dying in split-second acts of bravery. Each plaque uses simple, blunt language rather than grand poetic tribute, which somehow makes the sacrifice feel even more real and immediate to anyone reading it today. This memorial does not glorify war or empire at all, it simply preserves civilian courage that might otherwise have vanished from memory entirely. Reading even a handful of these plaques shifts the entire scale of history from empire and architecture down to one anonymous act of sacrifice. One plaque might describe a young factory worker who died trying to pull a colleague away from dangerous machinery, an act nobody outside that factory ever heard about again. Another might describe a child who drowned trying to save a friend from a river, remembered here in ceramic tile instead of any grand statue. Standing in this quiet park, surrounded by office workers eating lunch, most visitors have no idea they are standing beside more than 50 small, real acts of courage. Our seventh stop is one of the most photogenic quiet corners hiding inside the city of London, and its beauty hides real destruction underneath. St. Dunstan in the east is now a dreamy ruined garden where ivy and greenery climb through the remains of a bombed church. The church site itself goes back to around 1100, making it genuinely ancient by any standard measure of London history. For centuries it served as an ordinary working parish church, largely unremarkable compared to grander cathedrals nearby, until disaster struck it twice over the centuries. It was damaged during the Great Fire of 1666 and later partly rebuilt under the influence of Christopher Wren, especially its surviving tower. Then the Blitz of 1941 severely damaged the church all over again, this time through bombing rather than accidental fire. That second destruction left the church roofless and hollow, a shell that stood empty for decades before anyone decided what to do with the ruin. Rather than fully rebuild it, the city eventually turned the ruins into a public garden, which opened to the public in the early 1970s. The place most people experience today as peaceful, romantic, and photogenic is really a layered survival site stacked with fire damage and wartime destruction. This spot is not simply a ruin, it is a deliberate decision to preserve damage rather than erase it completely from the landscape. Visitors today often describe it as one of the most peaceful corners in central London, completely unaware that the peaceful atmosphere grew directly out of wartime bombing. Photographers and tourists now treat this ruin as one of the prettiest backdrops in the entire city, without realizing the ivy is literally growing through bomb damage. Our eighth and final stop is a small, charming clock tower that most commuters barely register on their way to catch a train. Little Ben stands near Victoria Station, a miniature relative of the far more famous parliamentary clock tower everyone recognizes instantly. Its design deliberately echoes that larger, more famous tower, giving travelers a small dose of grand civic style right outside a busy commuter station. It was erected in 1892 as a cast-iron public clock, serving practical travelers, while also reflecting Victorian civic pride in public design. Even this small, decorative-seeming clock has had a more disrupted life than most people assume when they glance at it quickly. It was actually removed during 20th century traffic works and redevelopment projects, then later returned to stand near the station once again. For a period, travelers passing through Victoria would have found no small clock waiting for them at all, an absence almost nobody at the time even wrote about. Even a tiny commuter clock like this one carries a story shaped by London's endless cycle of rebuilding, removal, and return. That quiet cycle of disappearance and return connects Little Ben to almost every other stop on today's list, from a bombed church to a rebuilt gateway. London rarely destroys its history completely, it tends to damage it, hide it, forget it for a while, and then quietly bring it back. That makes Little Ben the perfect closing stop, playful after heavier material, while still proving that history hides in plain sight everywhere in the city. Commuters rushing to catch a morning train rarely stop to consider that the little clock above them has literally been taken apart and rebuilt before. It stands now almost like a small mascot for the entire list. Proof that even the smallest, most overlooked object in London has already survived its own quiet disappearance. So there you have it. 8 places people walk past every single day, carrying pharaohs, fires, wars, mysteries, and quiet acts of everyday heroism. Notice the pattern running underneath all 8 stops today: destruction followed by rebuilding, mystery followed by meaning, and ordinary streets hiding extraordinary stories underneath them. That pattern is really the entire personality of London itself, a city that keeps building forward while quietly refusing to fully forget what came before it. The real trick of London is that history here does not always stand behind ropes waiting for a museum ticket. Sometimes it is simply sitting beside a station, tucked into a quiet lane, resting behind a sheet of glass, or lining the side of a busy road. If today's list surprised you, there is another video on this channel covering 8 more overlooked corners of London history worth exploring next. It follows the exact same format, present day, origin, and one surprising fact, applied to a completely different set of locations across the city. Go watch that one next, and start paying closer attention to the streets you walk down without thinking twice. Next time someone visits London and only wants the obvious tourist photo spots, send them past one of these 8 places instead. A 5-minute detour past Postman's Park or St. Dunstan in the east often leaves a stronger impression than another crowded photo outside a famous palace gate. That is really the whole spirit of this channel, finding the story sitting quietly beside the one everybody already knows.